with that, man, I want to introduce the guest speaker, which is Jimmy C.
All right. Love you, man. Hey, I'm Jimmy C. I'm an addict. And I'm having a great time. I really am. You know, I've been here several times. I don't know how many times. 3 times, I think. Right? And I don't know really this time. I really didn't understand, but I'm going to tell you something. That guy last year that was imitating Phil, he knew what he was talking about. What's his name? Yeah. Because when Phil calls you, he'll call you and he'll say, "Hey, brother." Right? That kid nailed it last year. Right? He did. Because you know something's coming, right? And he said, "Yeah, I was thinking, man, you know, it's the 15th year. And maybe you can come back, be the guest speaker now you live in Delaware, because it ain't so hard to get to." And I thought, well, I don't know, you know. But when he asks you to do something, most times you're going to do it. You know, it feels like that. So anyhow, I'm real grateful to be here. But more importantly, I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. We were kidding around this morning. I ain't kidding most of the time when I say shit. And I love Narcotics Anonymous. I really do. And, you know, when I come here, I see a labor of love. I told Phil, this is a labor of love, right? To put this on every year. I was telling Richard just a few minutes ago, this thing, to me, on a practical basis, I've tried a lot of things. I wire shit up, you know what I mean? In Narcotics Anonymous. I try to get things going. I do things, you know, and I've done some good things. And to get this many guys to sit all day and listen to each other share their experience, strength, and hope, it's almost an impossibility. But yet, every time I come here you are, right? It's magic. It's magic. You got something really special. Really do. I'm just pumping you up. It's hard to do this. It's hard to have that much unity. You know, and that's what it's about this year. You know, it says unity changes us. And I usually don't need one of these. I talk a lot. You know, I want to tell you this, you know. I want to thank you for asking me to come back. And I've been putting some thought into it. I've been clean since March 3rd, 1992. That's probably the most important thing you're going to hear out of me today. I've been clean in Narcotics Anonymous since 1992. The guy, and it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Oh man, that's like 25 years and 7 months and some days. But the other half of the story is it took me 7 years to put 5 days together. I went to my first meeting December 15th, 1984, over in South Jersey. I'm from Camden, New Jersey. That's part of what's wrong with me, right? And I grew up in Camden, and I was listening to my friend from Baltimore there, and I could so relate. You know, I didn't know. I preceded the epidemic by like 20 years, 25 years, you know. I don't know. Everybody was a junkie where I grew up, right? In Camden. I didn't know anybody who ever recovered. There was no NA meeting in Camden, New Jersey. When I tried to get clean, you had to go to the suburbs. And as I was telling Richard outside earlier, you know, it was the same 25 people traveled around from town to town. Really, the area would fit in this room. You know, so, and I didn't get clean, and the reason I didn't get clean was I wouldn't stop using. My friend used to call me the guy who refused to stop using, right? And I lied about it, and the people were so nice, and I've told this story many, many times. My mother, God bless her soul, she wanted me to get clean worse than I wanted to get clean. I had no desire to get clean. And she had a desire to get me clean so that I'd stop ripping her off. Okay, that was the pure and simple of it. And maybe become a responsible adult, because when I got clean, I was 39 years old. Anyhow, you know, what happened was she would drop me off at the meeting, and the people would bring me home. And sometimes they'd pick me up. But they'd take, after the meeting, it was usually like an hour and a half meeting over there in Maple Shade, New Jersey. Ellisburg Freedom Group is the name of the group. And they'd take me to the diner, and they'd buy me a cup of coffee and split their big old cinnamon bun with me, and they'd talk to me. And they'd say, how'd you like the meeting? And I'd say, oh, it's great. And they'd say, you understand what was going on? And I'd say, yeah, right? And then they'd drop me off at Mom's, and I'd strong-arm Mom for $20 and the keys to the car, and I'd be in Kensington scoring at 11 o'clock at night after spending the night with those good people from Narcotics Anonymous. And the pain of it was I couldn't tell you that. One time I was telling Richard earlier, one time I went to Texas for, I was back and forth. I went to Texas for 6 months, come back, and Barry says to me, where you been, man? I said, well, I went to Texas to see some friends. He said, you been clean all this time? I said, yeah. He said, well, you must have 6 months. And I said, yeah. So they gave out key tags at the beginning of me, and I felt compelled to get up and get me a bogus 6-month key tag. It sounds funny, but it was horrible. I lack the ability to save another human being. I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Didn't that sound simple, man? You know? And, you know, that's basically my story in a nutshell. I didn't come up here to talk about me. You know, I was junkie fireman. I was on the Canada Fire Department for 3.5 years, in 1974 to 77. And I was shooting, I did my first shot of dope 3 weeks before I went on the fire department. I was 21 years old, you know, and it was all downhill from there. And running the risk of getting kicked off, I left and went to Florida, and then I went to Texas after that. I went to Texas first time, 1977, because my father was a retired fireman, and I wanted to save him the experience of me getting kicked off, the shame of it all. You know, I didn't want to see that. So I left, and I blew, you know, shot up a lot of jobs, professions, and opportunities, okay? Hey, before I really get going here, my significant other just called while I was in the bathroom. She asked me to tell you this story. It used to be mine. Somebody stole it. Norman stole it, but it was mine. A little story, real quick. It takes about a minute. Well, there was once a guy, a preacher, and he came out on Sunday morning, looked over the congregation, and there was only one guy there, right? And he looked at it and said, he's kind of puzzled, and he didn't know what to do. So he went down like that and walked up to the guy, and he said, well, it's just me and you. What do you think? Guy had the bib overalls on, you know. And he said, well, I'm just an old country boy, but if I went out to feed the cows and only one showed up, I'd sure enough feed her, you know, right? And he said, well, alrighty then, right? And he come back up and he gave it everything he had, man. He was all hellfire and brimstone, man, for 45 minutes or something. He was pretty proud of himself when he was done. When he was done, he walked back to the guy and said, so what do you think? The guy said, well, you know, I'm just an old country boy, but if I went out to feed the cows, one showed up, I'd sure enough feed her. He said, but I wouldn't give her the whole load, okay? So, I ain't gonna try to give you a whole load today, okay? All right, I'm just gonna give you enough to let you identify with what I'm talking about, all right? Because I can talk forever about Narcotics Anonymous. But we all know how to use, right? And we all knew the desperation and the degradation and all of that. You know, if you've ever stood in the middle of the bridge and wanted to jump up but couldn't because you didn't have the nuts, man, I'm right there with you, you know? And if you ever, you know that look your family gives you when you come in and they're just the goddamn disgusted of your ass, and you feel it. And then they start following you around the house. You know? And it's a bad feeling. And like my friend said, I never wanted to be like that. I wasn't raised that way. You know, I just got carried away with this crap, right? You know, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anybody that recovered. I didn't know you could recover. I didn't know. And then I heard it, and then I got to tell you, man, what happened to me. I had this. I was in the VA hospital. It's a long story. I don't have time for it. But I was in the VA hospital. I don't know how many times. At the end, I found cocaine, and I had cocaine psychosis, which, if you're not doctors, you may know that this is when you hear things and you see things that aren't actually there. And they diagnosed me with that, and they put me in the psych ward. Then they moved me to the drug ward, and I was done that several times. And when I got out, I always used. Because I could find, I was real genius at finding the differences rather than the similarities. You know? I was, man, you know? And then people from there, somebody mentioned 89, they used to come in there when I was in there, and I'd want to stay in my room and build models because I didn't want to hear that crap. You know, I had been to meetings, it didn't work for me. I was convinced it didn't work for me. I was happy that it worked for you, but I wasn't real sure it would work for me. You know? So I set myself apart. There was nothing about this. I didn't pick up on the unity piece. I didn't feel a part of, and that's what unity is, when we begin to feel a part of, right? I didn't know any of the mechanics of finding a way to feel that I was a part of, right? And I didn't get clean until they had that old drum Jimmy C out of the family meeting. Yeah, and they got together and they conspired that they weren't going to let me steal their shit no more. My mother was dying, right? She had lung cancer. My aunt got together with my sister and my brother, and they told my aunt that she wasn't allowed to let me sleep on her enclosed front porch no more on that little lawn furniture. She wasn't allowed to let me borrow her little car for a week, you know. And oh, you borrowed a car for a week too? And they weren't going to do anything for me. I became homeless, and I was on the streets. I was in a Camden Rescue Mission, right? And I felt like I wanted to die, right? And Joey was with me. Joey Evans was with me. He was I don't know what you call it technically, but he had cerebral palsy. He was all twisted up, sitting in an old busted down wheelchair. The whole Evans family was junkies. The mom was a junkie. The sister was a prostitute junkie. Butchie was a drug dealer junkie. Mom sold works. And Joey, they stole Joey's money, so he had to get away. They used to steal his check. And so he was at the rescue mission. And we used to push Joey from the lower end of Broadway and Van Hook down by Broadway and Ferry, all the way uptown to the transportation terminal, stick him in there with a cup. People coming off the train would give us money, and then we'd go get high. That was our game at the end. And we was pushing Joey up to Broadway one morning. There was a little truck there that a guy had turned into a lunch truck, right? And had a window cut in the side. And I figured, well, it's freezing. I got this crippled guy. It's looking good, right? We'll get a cup of coffee out of this, right? And I walked up, trying to run some game on the guy that had the lunch truck on the vacant lot where the burned out building used to be. And I said, hey, man. He stood at the window. Yeah. I said, hey, man, how much a cup of coffee? Right? He said, 27 cents. Right there? 27 cents, he said. So I dug in my pocket. I come out, I had 24. Right? You heard the story before, right? I had 24 cents. And I said to him, I got 24. Can I slide? He said, no. Right? And I said, why not? He said, I don't trust you. And I was like, God damn, man. You motherfucker don't trust me for 3 cents till tomorrow? I felt like a worthless piece of shit. So what happened was, I got my little welfare check and my mother put me on the bus. To make a long story short, my mother put me on the bus. at 10th and Race in Philadelphia and I had a court date. I didn't want to go to court. I didn't want to go to jail. And I got caught with some stolen credit cards in Sears on one of my nuttier days. And she put me on the bus, and my mother kissed me and said, you know, I'm dying, and I just want to know that you're going to be all right. Because mothers are like that. And that's the last time I ever seen him. What happened was, God stepped in, I believe. That's what I believe today, anyhow. Right? Because people can pray us into this thing. You do know that, right? We got people that want us to get clean so bad, and I didn't have it. And I ended up in Houston, Texas, and a friend of mine from Camden was down there, and he had gotten clean. And he put me on a trial plan. He said, go to this place for 5 days. Just try it, man. And if you don't like it, you can go down the road and do whatever you want, man. No hard feelings. But he said, look, you don't look so good. I had a golf ball size abscess on my arm. I was 135 pounds, hair all over my head. I was filthy. I hadn't had a shower. And I said, okay. And I went there, and that thing kicked in again. I walked into a room, honestly, and there was 60 black guys, right? And one white guy. Mexicans weren't even on the scene yet, right? And I said, my mind said, oh, hell no. And it said, my mind said, how can six, and they were mostly crack addicts, by the way. So with the perfect ability to pick out the differences, I said, these are 60 black crack addicts from Houston, Texas. I'm a white heroin addict from Philadelphia. How in the hell are they ever going to help me? Right? And after the meeting, and their faces were they were like kind of shocked at the way I looked. And after the meeting, they came up and they hugged me. And this guy told me, I didn't know what it meant. At the time, I know what it meant today. He said, hey man, the war's over. You lost.
Wow.
Huh? And he said, you need to come over to winning side. You need to surrender, right? And I was still fighting it, you know. But I stayed around, man. I stayed around, right? And on the 5th day, I was sick. I was kicking. I didn't sleep. I went over there, and they wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go over in the dish pan and wash dishes with them big things. And I went over there, and on the 5th day, I might have slept 2 hours in 5 days or something, you know. And I was thinking about leaving. Had a plan. I was going to go down to the Salvation Army, right? I was going to get a job at the labor pool, work my way out of this thing, save money, get me a car and work my way out of this. Now, that was insane because every time I was a $20 trick, you know. If I had $18, I'd figure I'd get 2 on the way. And so, you know what I'm saying? So that was insane thinking, but that's what I was thinking. And I said, well, I'll do that. You know, no, I said, well, it's kind of late. You know, I got nowhere to go. I'll get breakfast in the morning, and then I'll be on my way, right? And I woke up the next morning with 6 days clean. I said, holy shit, man. I ain't never had 6 days clean. What the hell is going on here, you know? And I stayed there. And I stayed there, and I washed dishes for 31 days because it helped me breathe, the steam. And I began to recover. The people there, those guys I just described to you, they taught me how to stay clean. I was like their mascot or something, right? And then at 30 Days Clean, I went through that little 3-week program they had there. And the guy that, if y'all been in treatment, you know there's always a guy with a, what do you call it, notepad running around. Clipboard, that's it. Clipboard, trying to check whether you made your bed and all that. They gave me that job. It was an old apartment complex, right? And they gave me that job, and everybody was like, what? They gave this junkie the keys to the rooms? Right? And I worked there for $25 a week and room and board for the next 9 months, right? And I was telling him stories on the way up here. I had a sponsor that came by there every day, right? Bob the Bugman, right? We talk a lot about Bob the Bugman. Bob the Bugman, he was an ex-exterminator, dope fiend exterminator, lost his license because he had throwdown roaches and throwdown termites. And they caught him and his partner. You can't make this shit up. And but Bob was that person in all seriousness. That was the guy in the book. That one, you know that thing where it talks about there was that guy that took a special interest in you? That guy that had the perfect knack for knowing just what you needed before you ever expressed it? Bob was that guy. And Bob would pile, 15 of us in the back of his pickup truck and take us to get ice cream or play basketball. Or one time he took us to Bolivar Peninsula on a men's retreat, and we all slept on the floor, and he had us all out there with borrowed fishing rods teaching us how to have a good time clean. All that stuff that none of us never knew how to do, So God kind of put Bob in my life to teach me things that I just needed to know. I describe this thing many times as being perfection, God's perfection. God knew to put just the right people in my life at just the right time to tell me just what I needed to hear. And they weren't my idea of what those people would look like or talk like or act like. But they were the right people, ultimately, And I was telling Victor on the way up here, a guy came in there about 29 days after me, a guy named Dell, a white dude. So we hung out, And Dell worked over at the other house at night as a building tender. We had a place on the other side of town where people came from. There was pre-parole transfer facility, so we provided the staff over there. But he comes down at lunch one day and to eat, and then he'd go back to bed, go to work at 6 o'clock at night. And we were standing out by, there used to be a swimming pool in this little thing that was all filled in with all the old ranges, because we didn't need ranges, we had a shell. They threw them all in the swimming pool, covered it over a little dirt, and planted some shit out there. So we were all standing there around the fence that used to surround the pool, the little wrought iron fence. And I said, Bill, how you doing? He said, man, I'm good, man. Got me a sponsor, and I'm doing good, man, And Dell came there with bandages on his wrist, 29 days after me. I thought, well, shit, man, how that guy, he's really outpacing me, because I ain't feeling that good. And I said to him, Dell, do you still feel like using? And he said, no, not anymore. And I was like, God damn, man, how the hell did he do that, Because I wanted to use, everything in me wanted to use. I just hadn't used, right? And I said, how do you do that? And he said, man, have you asked God to remove the desire to use? And I went, no. And he said, well, you might want to try that, right? And I did. And I noticed about a week later, I was doing something around the house there. I said, God damn, man, I ain't wanted to use in a week. Right? And I said, man, that shit worked, man. So I found things out, one little piece at a time, man. I'm a certified member of the Slow Learners Club, right? And they spoon-fed me recovery, these guys. And I was joking earlier, you know. I was telling Daryl, Eddie G. He was an alumni guy, but he told me one time. Should I tell him? He said, "Kuzak." We were out on the sidewalk one day. He said, "Kuzak." Well, I was staying clean, you know, a few months. I don't know what. And I was the guy, you know. And he said, "Man, Kuzak," he said, "if you stay clean, you don't use, someday you're going to be an old fat white guy." Right? Here I am. Right? You know what I mean? I thought when he told me that, I said, "Man, that doesn't even sound right," you know? But anyhow, I have a good time. Look, I was standing outside talking to Richard L. about a lot of experiences regarding the unity in this thing, right? And how it does change us, right? And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir. A lot of you have a lot of experience with this. Just a mere fact that every time I come here, you guys are sitting here listening to each other all day long, right? Loving on each other, laughing, cutting up, having a good time. There's a lot of unity in that, right? So I know that you know. There's probably nothing I'm going to say that's new or revolutionary. Most of it's out of that book, right? But I thought I should look at that book, and I've been reading it since you called me a little bit, studying up, you know, and it talks about a lot of things for the individuals, for the groups. Some of y'all mentioned it. I think Larry said it earlier, right? But the way for me to feel the unity in Narcotics Anonymous is to get involved in service. You see, now I feel like I'm with you. It describes a story, which I love in there, of a guy who showed up at a meeting and he was standing around, not really feeling like he belonged. And he didn't know if he was going to come back. And the lady said, "Hey, can you go empty the trash?" And he emptied the trash. And he came back because he wanted to empty the trash again. And by emptying the trash, a menial task like that, he began to feel a part of the group, right? One time I went with Norman to speak in Santa Cruz, California. We flew out there. It was like 2009 or something. And we went out a couple days early. And it was the Monterey Bay birthday speaker meeting. I was the speaker. And they all get together and do birthdays. And about 300 people were there. And we went out early. And we went to a meeting there in Santa Cruz. After the meeting, they were all doing what they do. They were really cleaning up the meeting space and making it look good. And the trash was there, and I said, I didn't know about this story. The book hadn't even been written. And I said, "You want me to put the trash out?" And they said, "Yeah." And I took the trash. I said, "Where's the dumper?" And they said, "Well, it's way around the other side." And I walked out there. I was 14 years clean, something like that. And they said, "Yeah." And I felt what they describing in that book. Even though I'd never been in that group before, right? Didn't know nobody except the guy that invited me out there. He was with us. I felt like I was a part of that, you know? And I've done a lot of things in Narcotics Anonymous. I really have, you know? I felt the need when I moved. I got clean in Houston. I was clean 12 years. I decided to move to the beach. That's when I met Phil. And I went to Corpus Christi. I was working back and forth for the company. I was filling in down there. I liked it. You know, it's kind of cool, right? Sunny spot for shady people, they call it. And ain't that what they call it? Yeah, sunny place for shady people. And I went down there and I liked it. I decided I had enough of Houston and the traffic. I'm going to move to Corpus. And I got transferred down there. 3 weeks later, I had it out with the general manager. I forgot that he was the general manager and I wasn't. So it happens to me a lot. You may have the same problem. But I stayed 10 years, you know. And 2 years ago, I had to move to Smyrna, Delaware, because my my girl, her son's in the prison there. We want to be close to him. He's going to be there for a while. And, but in the 10 years that I was there, the last 3 years that I was there, I think we started in 13 or something. We started a little clubhouse thing. We were always talking it up. Val, he's dead now. He always talking it up. And I got us a place, and I got a little bit of help, but not a whole lot. And I remodeled it and tore all the shit out and leaned on people for money, and we started a thing, and it's still down there. Phil likes it. And we got pictures on the wall, and before that, the precursor to that was they didn't know what a speaker jam was down there when I got there. They didn't. And I said, let's have a speaker jam. And they were like, what? So we started the first, I love the thing. See, when you make a banner that says first annual, you're kind of hoping there's going to be a second one. You know what I mean? You're running on hope, right? It's the first annual. And we made the first annual Unity Speaker Jam. We had it over there at Charlie's place, and we had some speakers come from Houston, San Antonio, Austin, whatever the hell. And it was an effort to bring the fragmented would be a nice term, NA community together in a way that nobody had ever seen. And they still have it today. Somebody's doing it, you know. I don't know, they have one every year. And now they're having their own, groups are having their speaker jams. So the growth of Narcotics Anonymous is there. You know, I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I had a lot of help, you know. But I had Bob Bugman, there you go, right? Bob Bugman told me early on, all good ideas are 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And it's about getting that 90% to show up, you know. That's the trick. That's the beauty of the unity part of this thing, right? And the beautiful part about it is, when we find that unity, it's very attractive to the newcomer. And this is about the newcomer, right? When it talks about it in the book, I'll put it in my own words, though. When the newcomer walks in the door and feels welcome, he come back, right? I was telling Richard outside earlier, I've been to all over the United States working on boilers, and I go to meetings when I'm there. And I've walked into meetings where I did not feel welcome with time. You know what I mean? People didn't come up to me and recognize me as somebody they'd never seen before and offer me a hug, right? They didn't. It was like I wasn't even there. That's the way I felt, right? They didn't say, hey, you're from Houston? Maybe while he's in town we can get him to share just a little bit, you know, or something, right? I was a non-entity in some meetings. Not a lot, but a few. And I never want that to happen in my home group, right? So it's incumbent upon me to be what I want, what I want to have, right? So my sponsor, we hatched a plan when we broke away. It's a long story. But Hugs Not Drugs, a long time ago, we decided in group conscience, look, if we see somebody that we ain't seen before, make sure, you know, that we go up to them and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Welcome to Narcotics Anonymous. It could be just that simple. That simple thing could save somebody's life. They could come back. They might, you know. I bought a lot of books over the years, right? I've given people rides to the restaurant. I don't know how many meals I bought. And none of it, right, could amount to what I've been given in Narcotics Anonymous. Because I've been given the freedom from active addiction. A gift so precious, right, that no amount of money, no amount of time, right, could buy that. So Richard earlier, what I got today is when I lay down at night, I ain't robbed nobody, I ain't hurt nobody, right? I feel, it says in our book, what we want most is to feel good about ourselves. And most days, I feel pretty good about what I'm doing, right? So, those are not revolutionary ideas, right? But this thing says unity changes us. And it changes long before we see the change. You'll never even see it coming. Because when you take the action, like I said earlier, maybe when I was here, I don't know. I've been talking a lot today. But when I take the action indicated in the steps and I become that active part of Narcotics Anonymous, that guy, everybody knows me. I was telling Richard, my girlfriend won't even go to a convention with me because it takes an hour to get across the street because everybody want to get their picture taken with Jimmy C. Right? So I don't even go anymore. You know what I mean? I got used to it, And it's nice. And Victor asked me about it on the way up there. How do I deal with that? And I said, and I was telling Richard earlier, I do it because that's what people expect of me. It really makes me feel uncomfortable when I walk up to the tent at RBS and 100 people from Houston get up and come over and start trying to hug me. It really makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to be a big I and a little you. I just want to be one of the flock, if that makes sense. I don't want to be the guy. But I live in Smyrna, Delaware. It's not exactly a hotbed of Narcotics Anonymous. And when And when I showed up there, a lot of meetings that I go to, I got as much clean time as everybody in the meeting put together. Right? But it don't stop me from going. Makes me feel a little uncomfortable, and I wish it was different, So if you're a part of a group where you got a lot of people, with a lot of time, man, you really got something going, You got active participation in Narcotics Anonymous. Otherwise, they wouldn't stay. It's got to be that attraction, And look, sometimes, well, I'm almost out of time. Sometimes the best I can do is to leave them fucking people alone. You know what I mean? I'm a producer of disunity. I can be. Right? Back in the day, they used to call me out of order Jimmy. Because the chair of the area used to say, "You're out of order." And I'd say, "Oh, goddamn right, I know I am." Because my condition get worse when I'm right. And I usually won't say nothing unless I got the facts and I know I'm right. But being right ain't always unifying. Sometimes you got to make them think it was their idea. Sometimes you got to love them and practice patience and tolerance enough. Don't even worry about who gets the credit. Just so that the result is there at the end. One of the things that I believe in is our literature. And one of the things I believe in is those questions that we ask ourselves at the group conscience, And I was telling a story earlier about it, and some guy that died last year, he came back to the group there in Houston one time. We were reading those questions. And the first question is, guess what? Are newcomers being made to feel welcome? Right? Not how much money we got, right? How many times you go to group conscience, somebody want to talk about money all of a sudden, right? It says, are newcomers being made to feel welcome, right? How is our relationship with the facility? Are we throwing cigarette butts all over the ground, right? Are we acting like asses? Are we pulling out 90 miles an hour on Harley Davidsons? Are we peeling the wheels on our new Challenger, whatever the hell they got, right? Hemi or whatever the hell it is, right? Are we doing all those things? Or are we trying to worry about how best to be the best addict I can be to represent Narcotics Anonymous on any given day, right? So I think about that a lot, and I think those questions is what keeps us grounded in it, right? So look, like I say, man, there's no big... Gino, before he died, always used to tell me, I had Gino H. He grew up in Camden, I grew up in Camden, I went to school with his sister, we hung out. I had a great experience before he died, and he taught me a lot. He had a key to my house. And we used to argue till all hours of the morning about this Narcotics Anonymous thing. Because when Gino was right, he was just like me. And Gino told me this. He said, listen, y'all know Gino? You ever met Gino? He was like the Pope of Narcotics Anonymous. Had all the shit, and he rode around on his little cart. He said, my problem, I'm going to end with this, by the way. He said, I have the same problem. I'll just go ahead and tell you ahead of time. I had the same problem as Gino. But Gino said, my problem is that when I get it, whatever it is, I expect you to get it. And when you don't get it, I get mad. Because I forget that it might have took years for me to get it. And I'm expecting you to get it, and because I'm telling you it worked. Right? And that's not how it works. We lead by example. Basic text says, our only hope is to live by the example of those who have faced our dilemma and found a way out. And I question myself. I'm talking to a bunch of men now at a men's NA recovery conference, and I challenge you to question yourself when you go home tonight. What kind of example am I? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm ending with. Ask yourself. You don't have to ask me. You don't have to prove nothing to me. But I ask myself, what kind of example am I being when I'm at an NA meeting? Right? You know, am I being the things that we talked about on the way up here, the person that God intended me to be? Because I told Victor on the way up here that I believe that the steps are designed to make me the best person, to become fit to be of maximum service to God and my fellow man. That's what I believe the steps are. Become fit to be of maximum service to God and my fellow man. And sometimes I wander off. I wander off the reservation. I really do. Things look attractive. You know what I mean? I lose sight of what's really real. And then people bring me back. You know, I spoke here 8 years ago. And Phil, my friend Phil hatched this plan. Somebody, you know, he goes down to Corpus Christi, right? Usually flies, or drives or something. But this one year they took the bus. They had this bright idea to take the bus. And one guy decided he didn't want to take the bus, and he already paid for the ticket. And my friend Phil said, you know, I can get that ticket turned around. You can come up and share at the men's recovery conference. Right? You know what I mean? Remember? And I said, yeah, okay, Phil. You know, he'd been dogging me for years, right? And I said, yeah, okay. It was 2008. And the thing was, here it is. Our gratitude speaks when we care and when we share with others the NA way. That's what we talked about that year, right? And I got on a bus in Corpus Christi, and I rode 44 hours to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to share this thing that year. They put me up in a cot up on Kearsarge Street at that halfway house, stashed me up on the 3rd floor overnight, right? And it was $1 million experience, but I wouldn't do it again for 2. Right? This guy. So this year was a piece of cake. I got in my it's brand new to me car, it's for 14, and we drove 5.5 hours, you know. And we're staying at the Red Roof Inn, and we have a wonderful time. And like my friend said, we appreciate your hospitality. We appreciate the love and the show of unity that I've seen here, because when I see it, it becomes real for me, you know? And you guys got something really special. And if I don't ever come back here, right, because you never know what's going to happen. Right? If I never make it back here, I want to let you know you got something special here. Hold on to it, nurture it, because it's a God deal. This is a special moment when all of us can get together, especially the way things are out there right now, in a show of force, in a show of unity, with one purpose in mind, and that is to carry the message to that. Same thing it was number 8, right? Because the unity is what makes that possible. That when we share, they believe us. They see it, they feel it, and they come back. And with that, I want to thank you for letting me share. Thank you.